In the shadowed corridors of the Vatican, beneath layers of Renaissance paint and Baroque gold, something extraordinary hides in plain sight. The tender image of the Virgin Mary cradling her divine child echoes with whispers of another mother goddess, one whose worship stretched across the ancient world long before Christianity drew its first breath. Her name was Isis, and her story begins not in the hills of Palestine, but along the sacred waters of the Nile, in the temples of ancient Africa. Tonight, we embark on a journey through time and across continents to uncover one of history's most profound secrets, how the spiritual wisdom of Africa became the invisible foundation upon which much of the world's religious architecture was built. This is not merely a story of influence or borrowing, but of a deeper truth that challenges our understanding of faith itself. Picture, if you will, the golden hour in ancient Memphis, where the sun sets behind towering pyramids and palm trees cast long shadows across temple courtyards. The air thrums with the deep resonance of bronze sistrum rattles, their metallic voice calling the faithful to evening prayers. Here, in the heart of Kemet, as the ancient Egyptians called their land, priests in crisp white linen raise their arms toward painted ceiling murals depicting the cosmic dance of deities whose names would one day be whispered in languages not yet born. The goddess Isis stands at the center of our tale, her outstretched wings carved into temple walls from Philae Island to the Mediterranean coast. In her arms, she cradles the infant Horus, her face bearing the serene expression of divine motherhood that would inspire countless artists across millennia. The ancient papyri tell us that Isis could heal the sick, raise the dead, and protect sailors on treacherous seas. But more than this, she embodied the very concept of divine feminine wisdom, a theological innovation that would travel far beyond the borders of Egypt. When Roman merchants first encountered Isis worship in Alexandria around the 3rd century BCE, they found something that their pantheon of war gods and nature spirits had never offered: a deity who promised personal salvation and eternal life through devotion and moral living. The mystery cults of Isis spread like wildfire through the Mediterranean, establishing temples from London to Damascus. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii reveals elaborate Isis temples complete with holy water fonts, confession booths, and ceremonial meals that bear striking resemblance to later Christian practices. The great temple complex at Philae Island, now relocated due to the Aswan Dam, preserves hieroglyphic texts describing Isis as she who gives birth to heaven and earth, and the one who knows the hearts of men. These exact phrases, scholars note, would later appear in early Christian hymns dedicated to the Virgin Mary. The iconography, too, traveled this ancient highway of faith. Isis, nursing the divine child Horus, became the template for countless medieval depictions of Madonna and child. But Egypt was not alone in seeding the world's spiritual imagination. Further south, beyond the cataracts of the Nile, the kingdom of Kush rose as a formidable power whose religious innovations would ripple across Africa and into the ancient world. In the royal city of Meroe, massive pyramid complexes still stand testament to a civilization that conquered Egypt itself and ruled both lands for nearly a century. The Kushite pharaohs, known to history as the Black Pharaohs, brought with them a reformed version of traditional Egyptian religion, emphasizing the solar deity Amun-Ra while introducing their own fierce lion god, Apetamak. Temple reliefs at Naka depict this uniquely Nubian deity with 3 heads and 4 arms, embodying concepts of divine multiplicity that would later influence Christian Trinitarian theology and Hindu iconography. Trade routes carried these theological concepts southward into sub-Saharan Africa and northward into the Mediterranean world. The great pharaoh Taharqa, whose reign marked the height of Kushite power in the 8th century BCE, established temples throughout his empire that blended Egyptian tradition with Nubian innovation. His restoration of the temple at Karnak included new theological concepts about divine kingship and cosmic order that influenced political theory across the ancient world. The idea that earthly rulers derived their authority from divine appointment, a cornerstone of medieval European monarchical theory, has its roots in these African innovations. As we journey westward across the vast expanse of ancient Africa, we encounter spiritual traditions that would prove remarkably resilient in the face of historical upheaval. In the Yoruba city-states of what is now southwestern Nigeria, a sophisticated theological system was taking shape around the worship of the Orisha, divine forces that governed every aspect of human experience. Unlike the distant gods of many ancient cultures, the Orisha were intimately involved in daily life, approachable through ritual, dance, and offerings. The great deity Ifa, master of divination and wisdom, established a complex system of spiritual consultation that required priests to memorize thousands of verses containing moral instruction, historical narratives, and practical wisdom. The Ifa system represents one of humanity's oldest surviving oral literatures, predating many written religious texts. Each Orisha possessed distinct characteristics and areas of influence. Shango commanded thunder and justice. Yemoja ruled the waters and motherhood. Ogun presided over iron and warfare. When Portuguese slave ships began their tragic harvest of human souls in the 15th century, they unknowingly carried these deities across the Atlantic. But the Orisha proved impossible to destroy. In the sugar plantations of Cuba, the coffee farms of Brazil, and the rice fields of South Carolina, enslaved Africans found ways to preserve their spiritual heritage. They identified their Orisha with Catholic saints, creating syncretic religions like Santeria, Cantonio, and Vodou that survive and thrive today. The transformation was ingenious in its subtlety. Yemoja, the Yoruba Mother of Waters, became Our Lady of Regla in Cuba, honored with the same blue and white colors and associated with the same protective powers over mothers and children. Shango, the Thunder King, merged with Saint Barbara, maintaining his association with fire, drums, and divine justice. These weren't simple substitutions, but complex theological innovations that preserved African spiritual wisdom within colonial Christian frameworks. Archaeological excavations in places like New York's African Burial Ground have revealed how enslaved Africans maintained their spiritual practices even in the harsh environment of colonial America. Cowrie shells from West Africa, iron objects associated with Ogun worship, and burial practices reflecting African concepts of the afterlife demonstrate the persistence of these ancient traditions in new lands. Meanwhile, in the highlands of Ethiopia, another remarkable preservation of ancient African Christianity was unfolding. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, established in the 4th century CE under Emperor Ezana, maintained practices and beliefs that connected them to both ancient African traditions and early Christianity in ways that would astonish medieval European visitors. The great rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved directly from volcanic stone in the 12th century, were designed to recreate Jerusalem in the heart of Africa. But these churches also incorporated distinctly African architectural elements and liturgical practices. Ethiopian Christianity preserved ancient texts that were lost elsewhere, including the complete Book of Enoch and unique Gospels that provided different perspectives on Christian theology. The Ethiopian tradition of the Ark of the Covenant's presence in Aksum connects this ancient Christian kingdom to the deepest roots of Abrahamic faith. Whether or not the actual Ark resides in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, the tradition reflects Ethiopia's unique position as a bridge between ancient African spirituality and Abrahamic monotheism. Ethiopian monks influenced the development of Christian monasticism, carrying their practices to Egypt, Palestine, and eventually Europe. Perhaps nowhere is African spiritual sophistication more evident in the astronomical and cosmological knowledge of the Dogon people of Mali. French anthropologists in the 20th century documented Dogon creation myths that displayed remarkably accurate knowledge of astronomical phenomena, including the binary star system Sirius A and B, invisible to the naked eye. The Dogon spoke of cosmic eggs, spiral galaxies, and the fundamental vibrations that create matter, concepts that parallel modern physics in startling ways. The Dogon creation story tells of Nomo, amphibious beings who came from Sirius to teach humanity the arts of civilization. While scholars debate the origins of this knowledge, there's no question that it represents a sophisticated understanding of cosmic order that influenced traditional African societies throughout the region. Similar astronomical knowledge appears in the architecture of Great Zimbabwe, the megalithic circles of Nabta Playa, and the mathematical principles underlying traditional African art and music. These astronomical observations weren't mere curiosities, but formed the basis of complex religious and philosophical systems. The Dogon understanding of cosmic cycles influenced their agricultural practices, social organization, and spiritual beliefs in ways that integrated scientific observation with religious meaning. This holistic approach to knowledge would later influence Islamic scholars during the medieval period and contribute to the preservation of classical astronomical texts. The spread of Islam across North and West Africa, beginning in the 7th century CE, created new opportunities for the preservation and transmission of African spiritual wisdom. In the great centers of learning like Timbuktu, Cairo, and Fez, African scholars made crucial contributions to Islamic theology, philosophy, and mysticism. The Sufi traditions that developed in these regions often incorporated pre-Islamic African practices related to spiritual possession, healing, and communion with the divine. The great West African empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai became conduits for the exchange of religious ideas between Africa and the broader Islamic world. African pilgrims traveling to Mecca carried with them not only gold and salt, but theological insights that enriched Islamic thought. The famous Malian emperor Mansa Musa's pilgrimage in 1324 CE demonstrated the wealth and sophistication of African Islamic civilization to the medieval world. African metallurgical knowledge, particularly the spiritual significance attributed to ironworking, influenced Islamic and Christian symbolism throughout the medieval period. The Haya people of Tanzania developed sophisticated iron smelting techniques over 2,000 years ago, treating the process as a sacred act that transformed earth into powerful tools and weapons. This spiritual approach to metallurgy traveled with trade networks, influencing how other cultures understood the relationship between material and spiritual transformation. As we trace these ancient pathways of influence, we begin to see how African spiritual innovations became embedded in religious traditions across the globe. The concept of divine kingship, refined in the courts of ancient Kush and adopted by Egypt, influenced Roman imperial ideology and eventually European concepts of monarchy. The idea that rulers were divine intermediaries, responsible to cosmic justice for their earthly actions, can be traced directly to African political theology. The early Christian emphasis on communal worship, shared meals, and care for the poor reflects influences from African religious practices that emphasized community solidarity and collective responsibility. The Ethiopian practice of fasting, which influenced Eastern Orthodox Christianity, demonstrates how African ascetic traditions contributed to Christian spiritual discipline. Archaeological discoveries continued to reveal new connections. Recent excavations at sites like Jebel Barkal in Sudan have uncovered temple complexes that show sophisticated theological concepts about death, resurrection, and divine judgment that predate similar concepts in other religious traditions. The pyramid texts found in these sites contain references to spiritual transformation and cosmic rebirth that parallel themes found in later religious literature. The ancient African concept of vital force, known by various names across different cultures but representing the idea that all life shares a common spiritual energy, influenced religious and philosophical traditions worldwide. This understanding appears in Chinese concepts of qi, Indian ideas about prana, and European alchemical theories about the vital principle that animates matter. Perhaps most remarkably, recent scholarship has revealed how African mathematical and architectural principles influenced religious architecture across cultures. The golden ratio found in the pyramids of Giza appears in medieval European cathedrals, Islamic mosques, and Hindu temples. The acoustic properties carefully designed into African sacred spaces, which used specific proportions to enhance chanting and ritual music, influenced religious architecture from Gregorian chant chambers to Buddhist meditation halls. The preservation of African spiritual traditions through the colonial period represents one of history's most remarkable stories of cultural resilience. Despite systematic attempts to suppress indigenous African religions, core elements survived and adapted, often hiding within imposed Christian or Islamic frameworks. Today, as scholars work to recover this hidden history, we're beginning to understand the full scope of Africa's contribution to world spirituality. Modern archaeological techniques are revealing new evidence of sophisticated African civilizations whose religious practices influenced ancient trade networks. Carbon dating of sites like Great Zimbabwe has pushed back the timeline of complex African societies, while underwater archaeology off the East African coast has uncovered evidence of trade connections that carried African spiritual concepts to India, Southeast Asia, and China. The story of how African gods shaped world religions is ultimately a story about humanity's shared spiritual heritage. It reveals how wisdom traditions developed not in isolation, but through complex networks of exchange, adaptation, and innovation. The ancient African emphasis on ancestors, community responsibility, and the sacred nature of the natural world appears in modified forms across religious traditions worldwide. As we stand today in an increasingly connected world, these ancient connections take on new significance. The African spiritual traditions that seemed to disappear under colonialism are experiencing remarkable revival as people seek authentic spiritual practices that emphasize community, environmental responsibility, and direct spiritual experience. From Salvador to New Orleans, from London to Lagos, practitioners of Yoruba-derived religions maintain connections to spiritual wisdom that spans millennia. The Ethiopian Orthodox emphasis on contemplative practice has influenced modern Christian meditation movements. Traditional African healing practices that integrate physical, psychological, and spiritual approaches are being studied by modern medicine. The African understanding of cosmic interconnection resonates with contemporary environmental and social justice movements. Yet mysteries remain. Archaeological sites across Africa continue to yield surprises that challenge our understanding of ancient religious practices. The recent discovery of megalithic structures in southern Africa that appear to be aligned with celestial phenomena suggests that sophisticated astronomical religions may have existed far earlier and across wider areas than previously thought. We may never fully understand how a goddess first worshipped along the Nile came to be venerated in Roman Britain, or how West African concepts of divine multiplicity influenced theological developments in medieval Europe. But what we can say with certainty is that the spiritual wisdom of Africa flows like an underground river through the landscape of world religions, sometimes visible, often hidden, but always present. in great cathedrals where pilgrims light candles to the Virgin Mary, in Sufi lodges where mystics seek union with the divine, in meditation halls where practitioners contemplate cosmic interconnection, the echoes of ancient African wisdom continued to resonate. The gods may have changed their names and adapted to new cultures, but their essential gifts to humanity endure. The promise of healing, the hope of transformation, and the understanding that all life is sacred. What other connections remain hidden in plain sight? What ancient wisdom lies waiting for rediscovery in the ruins of forgotten temples or the oral traditions of surviving cultures? As we continue to uncover humanity's shared spiritual heritage, one thing becomes clear. The story of religion is far more interconnected, far more ancient, and far more African than we ever imagined. These are the questions that drive us forward in our exploration of faith's hidden history. If this journey through Africa's hidden spiritual legacy has opened your eyes to new possibilities about our shared religious heritage, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you noticed other unexpected connections between different faith traditions? Do you have family stories about spiritual practices that might trace back to these ancient roots? If you're hungry to uncover more of these remarkable stories that challenge everything we thought we knew about religion, make sure to subscribe to Origins of Faith and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest discoveries. We're constantly uncovering new archaeological evidence and historical connections that reshape our understanding of humanity's spiritual journey. And if this exploration has sparked something in you, please share this video with friends and family who might be fascinated by these hidden threads that weave through our collective spiritual tapestry. Give us a thumbs up if you'd like to see more deep dives into the forgotten influences that shape the religions we know today. Until next week, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember that the most profound truth